There is a developing story in Minnesota, of course, where state officials and the federal government are at odds over who is really responsible for the death of an ICU nurse. The Trump administration is saying a federal agent feared for his life when 37-year-old Alex Pretti reportedly pulled a gun. But Minnesota leaders say that's not what happened. Our CBS News teams have been poring over videos of the shooting from several witnesses who were there, frame by frame. CBS News Homeland Security correspondent Nicole Skanga shows us exactly what led up to the moment the federal agent pulled the trigger, killing Pretti. But first, a warning, some of the images you're about to see are disturbing.
About 2 minutes before the shooting, Alex Pretti is seen arguing with officers. One officer pushes him back, and an individual is detained as Pretti's argument with officers continues. Pretti, holding a cell phone, was allegedly there as an observer to document what was happening. About a minute later, Pretti is seen standing in the street, filming, directing a car past him. An officer then approaches another apparent observer and pushes her. She moves to Pretti and holds him by the waist, and the officer approaches and pushes Pretti. A second woman walks over. The officer pushes her to the ground, then sprays Pretti with a chemical irritant. Pretti raises his hands to block the spray. Pretti and the first woman then move to assist the woman who is knocked down, and the officer continues to spray. Several more officers arrive and drag Pretti onto the ground. An officer in gray reaches into the struggle and comes out holding a gun that appears to match a photo of a gun released by the Department of Homeland Security. In this video, obtained by CBS News, you can clearly see the gun being removed from Pretti's waist by the officer. The first shot is fired about 1 second later. Slowed to a quarter speed, you can see and hear how quickly the shot follows the gun's removal. In another angle, you can see an agent watch as the gun is removed from Pretti's waistband before the agent pulls his own gun and fires at the kneeling Pretti. The officers move away from Pretti as at least one of them continues to fire. Pretti does not appear to be moving. Around 10 shots are fired in total by law enforcement. After approximately 45 seconds, at least one officer eventually moves in and kneels next to Pretti.
All right, Nicole Skanga, thank you. Now I want to bring in Anna Schecter. She is the head of our CBS News Crime and Public Safety Unit. Anna, I think everyone just spent the weekend looking at these videos over and over again to try to determine what really happened here and what led up to this shooting. Why is there such a disconnect between what state and federal law enforcement are saying actually happened here? When you look at the video, people think you can look at this in a very conclusive way, but it appears people are having very different experiences.
Well, what Police Chief Brian O'Hara, the Minneapolis Police Department police chief, said over the weekend is he's concerned that these agents are actually making it unsafe for the citizens of Minneapolis. He didn't really get into details about it, but what the local and state officials have been saying about this shooting, as well as the previous shooting 3 weeks ago of Renee Good, that it was clear that these individuals did not pose a threat to the federal agents who were there. And that is exactly the opposite of what Kristi Noem, Department of Homeland Security lead, is saying. She's saying that they were a threat. And Kash Patel, the FBI director, even said that he had been planning a massacre, talking about this victim. So you're right, it's a total disconnect.
But without evidence, we should point out.
That's right. But completely opposite points of view. Now, here's the thing, is what I would urge, what I wish federal officials would have said is let's slow down, let's investigate. Why were these federal agents trying to push these people away? What were they doing on the other side of the street? What was behind that? There are a lot of questions that remain. Now, the victim here did have a gun on his hip that law enforcement, as you saw in the package there, retrieved right before he was shot. So when did they find out about that? Was it while they were on top of him? Remember, multiple agents had subdued him. He was on the ground. So what made them fear for their lives such that they would fire those shots? This all needs to be part of an investigation. What we have seen in the recent weeks is just this rush to explain immediately. And it's essentially the criticism, especially of the federal officials, is you're rushing to these conclusions. Within a half an hour, there's no investigation that's been done. These things take time. And right now, there's just so much noise. There's just this flood. And that is absolutely turning up the temperature and making the citizens and the people who are against ICE agents even being in their city become enraged and protest more, which is heightening the temperature as well.
I think you make an excellent point, and it's one that probably doesn't get hammered home enough, which is in no other scenario in this country or anywhere else in the world are officials quick to explain something that they themselves have no firsthand knowledge of. In other words, Kristi Noem wasn't there, Gregory Bovino wasn't there. Police capture a serial killer, they catch him with the person in the house, and they still come out and they say,
these are the charges.
These are the charges. We got to make sure we fully investigate. And, this person is innocent until proven guilty. We don't know, right? There's this whole process that happens whenever there's a police investigation into the most mundane. You can be pulled over for a traffic stop, and it doesn't get explained right away. And you know this as having covered crime your entire career. So it's incredibly unusual to have a situation like this where in almost every instance, the Secretary of Homeland Security comes out either on social media or in front of a camera to explain something that happened just a couple of hours earlier, or defend the actions of somebody just a couple of hours ago. That is in itself incredibly unusual, and I'm glad you pointed that out. So now the president is sending border czar Tom Homan to Minnesota. Now, this is what I find really interesting, because Mr. Homan, in his statements, including the interview that he gave to the CBS Evening News anchor Tony DeCopel, he was very measured about questions that he was asked, specifically as it relates to the killing of Renee Good. He didn't come out and say, yeah, she's a deranged leftist lunatic out to cause harm. He said, I want the investigation to play itself out. So is there a little bit of tension between the Department of Homeland Security and Mr. Homan's office and the responsibilities that he has? And because when the president says in True Social, he's fair, tough but fair, that kind of strikes me as sort of an interesting use of language.
This is such a great point. And we've seen some reporting around this where there is a disconnect between Kristi Noem and Tom Homan. And these are two officials that really need to be working together on this Trump administration policy because there's so much going on. You have federal agents in Minneapolis. They've been deployed to other cities. You still have a border that is, there are agents down there protecting the border. This is a multi-pronged policy, and Homan has been working on this type of policy for years. And so you need to have officials working together for the common good. And you just get the sense that the disconnect happening in this administration right now is not helping these situations. And the trickle-down effect is you have violence. You've had 2 deaths in 3 weeks, U.S. citizens shot and killed by federal agents. Now, of course, in hindsight, I imagine that those federal agents, if they could go back and undo what they did, they would probably do that. But the temperature has been turned up.
Anna, when we did something interesting and unique on CBS Mornings, we showed split screen of Secretary Noem describing what she says happened with the video that we can all see with our eyes. And even in the language it is used, he approached agents with a gun or with a weapon. He had one, but he didn't, that kind of language, when you say that to somebody, what is your first thought? He approaches somebody with a gun, pointing a gun at them. That's not what we see in the video. So it's the language that's being used that is incredibly unique that I've never seen before.
And also just such a quick escalation.
Yes, absolutely. And that is not helpful. In this moment, we are in this heightened, tense environment with a lot of consternation over what is going on. You have the country split and divided. And so when you have this rhetoric and this rush to throw around language, it does not help the situation. We've got to turn down the temperature, and that's not what is happening.
Yeah, we've got a million more questions, but we have to move on. Anna, thank you.